Booba, booba, poopa, doo-doo, doo-doo, poopa.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Allan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat The Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And each week, we take a look back in time to decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, and want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie takes to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV. We review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. Find all the information and past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. And finally, to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Shat The Movies on YouTube, where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing today?
Gene, it seems like we had just escaped the jungles of Africa, but we're turning around and going right back in because the call of adventures got us, and it's all because MoonlitTear. MoonlitTear said you can't do one without the other, so they commissioned the 1986 sequel adventure, now comedy, Allan Quatermain and the Lost City of Gold.
And for those who joined us last week for King Solomon's Mine, this is the second installment, and we are recording these back to back on the same day. So we're going to see how this goes. It should help us flow a little bit better. We get better as we go into the episode, so this one should be a fucking gem. Allan Quatermain and the Lost City of Gold is a 1986 adventure comedy directed by Gary Nelson and loosely based on the 1887 novel Allan Quatermain by H. Rider Haggard. In this sequel to 1985's King Solomon's Mines, Richard Chamberlain returns to the cast alongside Sharon Stone, whose performance in this one earned her a Golden Raspberry nomination for Worst Actress. She did lose that year to Madonna for Who's That Girl? And Lost City of Gold also starred James Earl Jones, Henry Silva, and Richard Chamberlain's then real-life partner, Martin Rabbit. So Big D, we always ask where you were and what your memories are of the movie. Last week, it was King Solomon's Mines. This week, it is the sequel, Allan Quatermain and the Lost City of Gold. What do you got?
So, Gene, unlike last week where I had a false memory of not seeing King Solomon's Mine, this week it was correct. I had not seen this, didn't know it existed. And it's strange because if you look at that movie poster, the hand-drawn, it looks like Drew Struzman, who does all like the Goonies, the Back to the Future. It is that hand-drawn art. And this poster, it screams, Big D, you should be coming and seeing me. There is action. There's adventure.
I mean, this is once again the Cannon Group knowing exactly where to invest. You kick us with a poster like this after a movie like that, and we might just go see it. My only real memory of Allan Quatermain is last week when I watched King Solomon's Mines.
Yeah.
And after doing that 4-wipe review, knowing the movies were filmed together, these two movies, King Solomon's Mines and The City of Lost Gold, were filmed at the same time. I didn't expect great things from this sequel. With the exception of Home Alone and The Godfather, I've had a pretty rough go with sequels. They're generally not as good as the original. And Allan Quatermain, it's certainly no Godfather.
Wow, that's a bold stance there. That's a hot take, Gene. Way to fucking start right out of the chute. Hot take.
You only hear that kind of commentary here on Shat The Movies.
Guys, you're not going to believe it. Gene said that Allan Quatermain, it's not as good as The Godfather.
Let's hit the trailer.
Allan Quatermain, the master of adventure, has teamed up with the most unlikely partner.
America's about 6,000 miles that way.
To pursue the dream of a lifetime.
It's dangerous and it's crazy.
And it's what I've got to do.
Gold, streets of it.
Their searching for the long-lost treasure of an ancient civilization. Guarded by a mad tyrant and his ruthless warriors. The odds are against them, and that's the way they like it. Richard Chamberlain, Sharon Stone, and James Earl Jones in the adventure movie of the year, Allan Quatermain and the Lost City of Gold.
After surviving King Solomon's mines, Allan Quatermain, Jesse Huston, Big D, and Gene have settled down in colonial Africa and are engaged to be married in America. One of Quatermain's friends, Dumont, appears days before the couple are scheduled to depart for America, chased by two strange masked men. Jesse and Allan care for the delirious Dumont, but his pursuers return and kill him later that night.
So having the ability to watch these movies back to back, it makes it clear the drop in quality. Even though both of these movies, they were shot back to back in Zimbabwe, same crew, they were released a year apart. If you go back and look at the budgets, Lost City of Gold, this claims to be 13 million as opposed to the first was 12.5 for King Solomon's. But I don't believe that for a second. This is creative Hollywood accounting to balance the books, to not pay out residuals. This movie feels cheaper. The action sequences are small. The sets, the special effects. I don't know why, Gene. I'm watching the credits. Normally, I want to get out of this movie as quick as possible. And my eye just catches. It says special effects crew. And normally it's like keep scrolling. 4 people. There were 4 people in this entire movie who were in charge of special effects. They even, to cut costs, they used the score from the original film again, and there was only 30 minutes of additional music added to it by Michael Lynn. They were cutting costs, and I think you can feel it's a step backwards.
You got to put yourself in the shoes of Golan and Globus. Again, for people who didn't listen to the last podcast, Golan and Globus were the Israeli cousins who bought out the Cannon Group and kind of made it their own thing, and they churned out all these 80s B movies. They got $25 million total budget for a pair of movies. Where would you invest the bulk of it? A smart business person, okay, I'm not saying an artist trying to make a legacy series that'll stand the test of time. I'm saying you're 2 Israeli cousins, you're trying to make a buck. The smart way to do that is pack all the good shit into the first movie, right? Hope it'll get people excited. And then you have a really cool poster and you release the second movie. That second movie, it could be dog shit. Because by the time people see it and complain, you've already moved on. Now you're doing American Ninja 2. The Cannon Group had no idea that 2 losers in 2023 would reviewing Lost City of Gold on something called a podcast for someone named MoonlitTear.
What you're saying there makes sense. This is like, I'm going to think of it as like a music group. They recorded 14 albums. They put all the good ones on the first album. This was the B cuts. This was the shit that normally you would never publish. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these set pieces belong in the first movie. They just mixed and matched. You're like, okay, well, it doesn't make sense. James Earl Jones wasn't there. People aren't going to notice. Don't worry.
At this point, the people of Zimbabwe are like, please leave.
Yeah.
We saw what you did with the first one, you assholes.
Yes, please leave, white man. Please leave. And, in the first movie, we debated whether or not whether King Solomon's Mine was a parody by choice or whether it was just a shield that they could put around the film when it didn't work as well as it should have. Okay, we got Benny Hill music and sped up. We're being funny. With this movie, there is no question. It is clear this is attempting to be a parody of Indiana Jones and the genre. You've got quotes in the beginning where his best friend shows up and he's beaten and he finally gets murdered in his own house. And he says, one thing for sure, the fever didn't kill him. I'm like, all right. Or they have a character of Shawarma, who's the spiritual guy. This dude is on a boat. He says, I don't know how to use an oar. He doesn't know how to use an oar. He throws a monster at another guy when there's this like caveman warlord who shows up and he's like Captain Caveman. He's like breaking rocks with his head. People just don't seem to be able to do normal functional things like put the oar in the water or walk, use a language that exists. This is clearly a parody.
Shawarma is what we'll be serving at the wedding. Swarma is the guy in this movie. And I'm so glad that you brought him up because for listeners, they don't expressly say that Swarma is Indian. right? Like nowhere is like, hey, the Indian guy shawarma, but he's got a turban. He likes to kind of sit in that Hindu seated pose. He clasps his hands together, does a lot of bowing. He definitely has the Indian, let's call it skin tone and accent.
It's a white dude.
Shawarma is not played by an Indian man. We should make that very clear. This is a very short circuit sort of thing. He's played by a New Yorker and Michigander named Robert Donner, who's like pretty damn white. So I gotta ask, Big D, in your opinion of this parody, is shawarma supposed to be like in the movie universe?
No.
Is he a white dude dressed up as an Indian dude to pull off a con job, or is he supposed to be an actual Indian dude living in Africa?
No, listen, don't give this movie that much credit. No, we're gonna no. It's not that self-aware. That was cost savings. They gave the script to anyone of Indian descent, and they said, we are not doing this.
I was going to say, when has it been cost savings to hire the white guy instead of the Indian guy? I expected when he gets dumped in the fountain at the end of the movie that like all of the skin would come off and he's just a white dude, and that's the joke.
Do that, and it's a joke. Like that was all part of the con. He was a white guy pretending to be the spiritual leader to steal the gold. That would have worked.
Any of our East Indian friends who watched this movie, I apologize for the misrepresentation, because as an Iranian, if they had done this, I think I might have been a little bit pissed.
I think it makes it okay that it was a white guy, because you can say, "Oh, we're a brave people." Shawarma, I keep saying shawarma. That shawarma, that coward was a white man who's always hiding and stealing. You can write it off. It's not offensive because it wasn't them.
Well, before Dumont dies, he tells Allan that Allan's brother has found the legendary lost city of gold. Quatermain immediately starts preparing an expedition to find his lost brother, seeking out a mysterious guru named Shawarma and purchasing an armored undershirt. Jessie is furious and she stalks off, but then she realizes how important rescuing his brother is to Allan.
In case you're stumbling upon this episode of the podcast, we did address it last week in the original movie in this trilogy. This book was written in 1887, right, Gene? Very different world, a very different place, different thoughts, different laws. It was a very different place. And we commented about how King Solomon's Mine, it was culturally inappropriate. Today, you wouldn't. Whatever. Just go back and listen to it.
Not only would you not make the movie, you wouldn't want to make the movie.
No, it just would be mean-spirited. It's like an old-timey, you're like just what? It's exactly like you would expect someone from the 1800s thinking. It's on film. And I think this movie, though, says, hold my beer. This makes that movie look like a National Geographic documentary in comparison. This one, yes, we've got more cannibals. Everybody is backwards. They're all indigenous tribes. You have blackface in shawarma. Everyone is mystified by a gun. Oh, you're a god, or some kind of armor, even though we've already seen it in world. But they take the extra step. They don't try to speak, because I watched the subtitles. Before it said native language. This time it says tribal language. It is straight up a made up language that they're using on set. It's like Ringo Starr saying a took a lunalada. That's what they're doing. Quatermain is a point where he's going to mesmerize these ignorant, backwards tribes, these animal barbarian tribes, and he's going to pretend to conjure a spell, and he says, "Booba, booba, poopa, doo-doo, doo-doo, poopa." That's actually, he's giving the middle finger to every Zimbabwean on set.
And they don't waste any time getting to this cultural insensitivity. When the movie opens, we basically see this in full effect. In this movie, you have two types of black people, and they're in this scene. You've got savages who are hunting down Dumont. Okay, those are the scary blacks. And then you've got African kids, the nice blacks, and they're on Allan's... it looks like a plantation, right? Yeah. All of the black people in this movie, they are just creatures for entertainment. They are either hopelessly ineffective killers that Allan's always going to outsmart or outfight, or they are weights for a makeshift trap shooting set.
I was expecting him to start tossing food at the kids. Like they're monkeys, like tossing like bananas or fucking, because he's treating these kids like they're little playthings. And the house, like the housekeeper, right? It looks very, very Gone with the Wind. Mm-hmm. It looks very Southern, right? His friend Dumont shows up. This dude's got malaria. He's in his house. He's got the net up. They got her under the net tending to him. I don't think that should be part of their job description. But the housekeeper, she's exposing herself. Everything else, Gene, like you said, there's the ones that you let in the house and the ones that you keep in the backyard.
But at least they're consistent. This was the highlight of the movie for me, and you're going to see how detailed we are in our review. Alan, he decides, okay, I gotta go find my brother, which, by the way, Jesse is not super understanding of, which is ironic. Because in the first movie, the whole reason they meet is that Jesse is going to rescue her father. But when Alan wants to go and rescue his brother, she's like, I can't believe you were supposed to go get married. Anyway, he gears up for his expedition, and we see he's only got a revolver. Now, in the last podcast, you heard us talking about that sweet-ass sawed-off shotgun. But that trademark gun, which Allan Quatermain lost in King Solomon's Mines, it's nowhere to be seen in this movie. He later replaces it with a rifle, which he then uses to exterminate all the bad blacks, half the population of the African jungle.
So in my fanfic, in my Quatermain fanfic, it was lost. It's like when the Millennium Falcon shows up in The Force Awakens.
Spoiler alert.
And it's got the different dish on the top.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going through in my head.
And before we move on to the next point, I really want to state to people, as we're laughing at this cultural insensitivity, we are not laughing at it in the sense that we think it's okay. We're not laughing at it in the sense that we think that black children are monkeys. That is not what we're saying.
No.
What we are saying is that that's the way the movie is viewing these characters and treating these people. We're not laughing at the joke. We're laughing at the joke teller.
And I'm joking that, like, how the fuck did this exist?
Right.
How was there a time during my lifetime that people said, yeah, hey, professionally, let's write off on this. Let's do it. Guys, this is killer take, guys. Everybody, let's go back and print this.
Tomatoes. Well, Alan and Jesse are joined on their expedition by Umslopogus, a fearless warrior, Swarma, the con man, and 5 Askari warriors. The group crosses a desert and reaches the walls of Japora, where 2 Askari are lost when Swarma trips a booby trap that opens a pit under the road to the city. Another member of the party perishes when savage Ashowe warriors attack the group. The warriors throw spears, once again, but Umslopogus deflects most of them with his giant axe, while Quatermain's armor saves his life and Swarma counters with dynamite. If you expose yourself to the Allan Quatermain series the way we did, watching them back to back, at this point, you're going, great. It's another deadly tribe. The tribal danger was getting stale in the first movie. And maybe if you took a year between the movies, you might get a breather from that. But we did not do that. So now it is downright repetitive. And this is why Indiana Jones was so smart. They changed venues. They changed villains. It kept things fresh. Think about it. Raiders is in Peru and Egypt with Germans. Temple, you've got India with the Thuggies. The Last Crusade then takes us to loads of places, including America and Austria and Turkey. Crystal Skull switches things up. We get rid of the Nazis. We got the Soviets. You get the idea. When only white characters get speaking roles and these tribes are reduced to face paint and saying ooga booga, the whole concept just feels like a spin cycle. It's just a repeat of the same thing we've seen now for 2 straight hours.
Yeah, and Gene, you don't even mention the worst part. When Alan's finally decided to go on this mission, he goes out to a market where he's going to find his team. And it's like a game lobby in Drop Zone. He's out there and he's picking his team. And there's like the dudes with the face paint. Oh, we got cannibals. Oh, another one. They'll steal from you. Oh, they'll run away from you. But it's all the same tribe. Like it's nothing new. And those poor Sherpas, throughout the entire movie, he loses probably a dozen Sherpas. Those dudes are killed. They're snuck up on at night. They're getting a knife to the neck. They go into the big pit of fire. It's a bad life for those characters. And we talked about last week how I was surprised and optimistic when we saw Sharon Stone. This one, I had a holy shit moment. James Earl Jones appears on screen. He's younger. He's more fit. He's looking kind of like a Forrest Whitaker. And to be honest, this man is trying his best with the limited material he's given. And I couldn't help but feel bad for this man. We commented how good he was in Conan. This is Darth Vader, people. This is after the Star Wars trilogy. And he's figuring, I'm going to be getting the good roles now. Instead, he's stuck with Soul Man, that he did before this, lost City of Gold, and then, hey, come back and play an African king in Coming to America. But to his credit, he plays this shit honest. He plays it hard. He's trying, no matter how ridiculous he looks. He's fighting again like Sharon Stone, a kid drowning for her acting career. Because no matter how many swings he takes with that giant carrot top axe, this man is dying inside, but he's not going down without a fight.
Big D, and all the things you said, there was a lot of truth. You're not wrong that he's acting his ass off. You're not wrong that Sharon Stone and James Earl Jones were surprises in this series. And you're not wrong that James Earl Jones had some pretty huge, important roles prior to this movie. But you said two things that just kind of slipped in there, and I want to call attention to them. Pull out my little Gene Lyons highlighter. You mentioned Forrest Whitaker and Fit in the same breath, and also James Earl Jones. Listen, this man is a talent. Nothing against his acting. But I don't know about Fit. There is a scene in this movie where he has to leap what looks like a 3-foot chasm. I am not fleet of foot. I am not an athlete by any means, but I could do that. This man takes a 10-yard running start back into the cave. They still had to clearly cut the film and add a stuntman to jump over what essentially amounts to a shopping cart. But yes, James Earl Jones is channeling some serious Thulsa Doom in this movie, and I am here for it. He's delivering some tough-ass lines. He even went to the trouble of physically making us believe that his plastic axe weighed like 100 pounds. Like, I would believe that was a real gigantic axe. He had me believing. This is a massive upgrade from Umbopo in the first movie. Like, you want a real mighty sidekick? James Earl Jones is your guy.
Dude, I'm looking at pictures of him now because I knew you were going to challenge me on his fitness. He is dressed as King Jaffe Jaffer. Is there some world where this is the origin of Zamunda and he becomes king? He takes the tribe back. Eventually, Eddie Murphy is born, his son. He goes off to America because that was like the next movie he did.
Yeah, I mean, he had access to a lot of gold at that point.
And oh, dude, he's wearing a lion pelt. He takes out 2 lions. 2.
Big D, you mentioned Call of Duty lobbies earlier in the podcast. Can I say also that this group that they put together for this expedition, it's the world's worst Dungeons and Dragons party. After 7 years of starting up beginner Dungeons and Dragons games, often serving as the dungeon master, I've completely given up on getting friends into role-playing games. It's the most frustrating experience you could think of. And the Lost City of Gold, it resurfaced some of that trauma that led to this decision. You've always got one guy that you're playing with. He knows what the fuck he's doing, right? He's played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons before. He understands the game. That's James Earl Jones. Like, he gets it. He's playing that fighter role, and he's got his background. Okay, what's your background? I'm a Zulu chief. Do you have a special weapon? Yes, I've got my axe, Groan Maker.
Yeah.
He knows his actions. He knows his bonus action, the spinning trick.
Is that the name of it? Was it really Groan Maker?
Yeah, Groan Maker the axe. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I thought you just made that up.
No.
My God. Okay.
Yeah. Then you got your rogue, right? You got Allan Quatermain. He always ends up being more effective than you expect. That's typical for the rogue of your party. And then you've got these new players. And the new players tend to pick classes that are best reserved for veteran players because it's not as straightforward as just hit the thing with the axe. Swarma is slotted as the cleric role, right? Your religious leader. And admittedly, he uses some divination, but he forgets to dish out any heals to the party. And he keeps wanting to play the rogue. He's trying to do sneaky shit, but he's really bad at it. I'm guessing Jesse, I don't know what Jesse Huston's actually doing here in this movie at all. Maybe she's supposed to be the bard, like she's there for Alan's inspiration, but she fails to inspire anyone.
No, you're wrong. Swarma, that's Subutai. He's the thief.
But he's not a good rogue.
I think he's a thief primarily.
Oh, so you're saying that he's a crossover rogue cleric? That's a terrible, terrible class.
What? I don't know what a rogue... I'm thinking that he's Subutai from Conan. His job is to play a role to ingratiate yourself and people so you could steal from them.
Oh, so he's bulking up on his charisma, which I do believe, but really an effective cleric would go with more wisdom so that he can suss out the bad stuff and also pull off some spells. Big D, you mentioned the Sherpas. The sort of Askari warriors, those are the guys who are just useless in this party. They don't fight at any point in this movie other than helplessly hacking at the water. And I can't help but wonder if the movie would be improved by a few more badasses in this group, right? You look at things like Conan the Barbarian, you look at movies like Lord of the Rings, you need a party where everybody can do something special and actually contribute to the fight, not float their canoe into a giant flame. Well, after the final Ascari die while navigating a subterranean river, Quatermain and his friends finally discover the city. The inhabitants, including a mystical white race, are friendly, and Allan finds his brother Robeson in good health and at peace in the society. The city has two queens, the noble and beloved Nyleptha and her power-hungry sister Sorias. But the real leader is the evil high priest Aegon, feared by all. I don't want to bring too much logic into this podcast. I understand this is a fantasy action adventure movie, but I have to ask like the simple questions that anybody crafting a quality film would answer. Why is the city of gold lost? It's in the fucking title. This is a giant white citadel in the middle of a wide open field. Judging by the climate, it's fairly like tropical. Everybody's in like light linen robes. It doesn't seem to be at elevation, so it's not like you could say it's on top of a mountain. There's no thick canopy over it, so you can't say the trees are obscuring the view. It's not underground. Anybody with an airplane and a pair of eyes could see this city from a mile away. And the crew reaches it on foot in a matter of days while carrying equipment. So you can't say it's out of flight range for an airplane at that time. Instead of marching through arid deserts and dense jungle, then canoeing through the devil's heart, wouldn't it make more sense for Allan and company to just fly to the city? For that matter, how has nobody else found this city? It's right there.
It's got a giant double gold door that glistens in the sun. It is high up on the mountain. Like you said, there's airplanes in world. It would make sense. There's giant waterfalls around there. So you know there's lush vegetation. There's animals. Fucking lions come up to the main gate. You've got the other tribes. First thought, it was like subterranean. I thought they had found almost like a world within a world. But instead, it turns out to be like in Star Trek New Generation, when they find that peaceful clan and Wesley Crusher falls into like the vegetable thing and they sentence him to death. It's a very utopian, weird society. And it's just like a weird group of people.
Yeah, they're actively trading gold. They're smuggling it out of there. So you're telling me nobody's mentioned to anybody else where this city is? And there's something else fishy happening in the lost city of gold that has nothing to do with gold. I'm not talking about the bizarre dual queen theocracy that's never explained. I'm not talking about the fact they made a slaver their high priest or the general like weird cult-like uniform everyone's wearing. I'm talking about a glaring issue here. The city has white adults, black kids, white kids. But there are no mixed race kids in this city. I don't know if there's some sort of hidden apartheid, if the races are not allowed to interbreed. Do they gold dip the mixed kids like at birth? Like, oh, give me that brown one, dip. Do they feed them to the lions outside the gates? Like, I couldn't stop searching every scene for just one little brown boy or little brown girl to dispel my concerns.
I think it would make sense because you remember, who does the lion attack? The brown member of the group. It sees James Earl Jones, who goes up and he hugs it. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to be that beautiful moment. Like where someone is reunited with the animal that they raised, 18 years ago, and they're going to go running and hug. He's hugging it. He goes down and fucking kills it with his bare hands. It's because they're feeding the little brown kids. And I thought maybe this was analogous to apartheid at first, that you have the lost white culture and it's about securing and protecting it up on the mountain. So maybe in that utopia, you're not allowed to sleep with anyone who's not your own race.
And maybe it's just me, but I had a reaction when they kept talking about the lost white race. It's like, oh, like we need to discover another one. We didn't have enough already. Let's go discover the other white race that we lost.
Dude, this is the whitest race. This is like a Swedish colony.
It's your people.
This is like all the little blonde kids. These are my people. Yeah, but they're a little bit too short. But I've already mentioned that we had a 4-member special effects crew. So I'm going to be a little kind. I'm going to let that slide, but fucking come on. The green screen work in this, it is so bad. It makes King Solomon's Mine shadow from Sharon Stone's head when she's flying a plane look like Avatar. There's a Temple of Doom knockoff where instead of on the little rail car, they're in a riverboat and it's going down this thing. The CGI is the worst we have ever seen in Shat The Movies. Worse than Annihilation. It is awful. It has to be that they were trying to be that bad. There's a part where there's bats and come and attack them. You can see the strings on the bats as they're wiggling them. The lion that I mentioned, James Earl Jones kills, he grabs it, one of them, because he kills two, and throws it down into like this cave. It looked like the cowardly lion from Return to Oz. I'm like, that is the fucking lion he just killed. There's one part. Did you notice you mentioned the whatever the fuck his axe is called?
Groanmaker.
Did you notice that at certain scenes you could see there was like a baton handle on it?
Yeah, it's part of its design.
It's not there. No, that is the prop handle. He holds it like a billy club and spins it. It is a straight up axe. In the other scenes, it is not there. It's laughable. Then these lizard monsters come out that are like some kind of puppet that they keep cutting the heads off. They're dipping people in gold, which is clear paint. And then the dummy, the hardened like remnant of it, looks nothing like the people who it was before. This movie was struggling.
Did you see the cables on Allan Quatermain? He
Yes.
burst through the ceiling in one of the final scenes to rescue Jesse and Nyleptha. At first, I thought I was mistaken. Like, oh, I was actually seeing the cables that were on the giant suspended disc. But I rewound it, and no, there's like a clearly visible belt, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, on Allan Quatermain just to have him fall. It's bad.
No, I thought that was an homage or a parody of Temple of Doom in the beginning with Anything Goes, where Indy drops the giant gong and he goes and runs behind it to shield. But no, did you also see in the beginning when they're first attacked, he's in the woods wearing his suit and he's attacked by the two warriors. There is a rope on the ground, which is either for some kind of security or it could be a wire from set, but it is clearly out of place. I thought maybe there was a tripwire bomb there. But no, and again, I want to cut this movie slack because they were obviously hurting. They were hurting. They were trying.
I mean, clearly, Allan Quatermain had no security around his little plantation because they were able to go in at night and kill the man they were trying to kill earlier that day. Big D, if I ever come to your home and there are people with knives chasing me and I collapse with malaria in your front yard and you take me and you put me to bed, please don't leave me unattended that same night because those guys might come back.
Yeah, and you tell me he only has those 4 young kids working for him. There's not like 30 of them around the perimeter who these two guys had to cut through to get there.
And they'll probably like, fuck Dumont. Well, Allan raises the population against Sirius and Aegon, who musters an army to recover the city by force. Allan arms the people of the city with gold, and a mighty siege ensues. The final battle ends during a storm when Allan uses Umslopaga's axe to channel lightning and melt the gold, causing it to flow off the side of the structure and pour over the attacking horde. Aegon and his army fall prey to the gold and are turned into statues. It's that dumb. When Allan Quatermain turns the Lost City's people against Aegon, we learn through context clues that these people were not really into all the sacrifices and the slavery and the high priest in general. They cheer when the sacrifice table is smashed by Groanmaker. We also learn at that point that the city was being protected by these local tribesmen, as you mentioned, Big D. They're kind of comical, very Mel Brooks sort of tribe. Aegon was paying these guys gold to secure their borders. And that makes sense because the Lost City has no fighting force, but it has a limitless supply of gold. But then I got to ask, why do they have slaves working in the smelter? Like these poor guys, if you haven't seen the movie, they're sitting there, they're like raising cages into the smelter. They're pushing carts around. They're all just doing their jobs, like earnestly doing their jobs. Nobody's taking breaks. Nobody's slacking off. And they are being whipped and flogged by these overseers. And it just seems to be slowing them down.
But Gene, a bigger problem, what is their business practice? What is their actual mechanism? Instead of mining gold, they're taking gold and throwing it into a molten, like Willy Wonka chocolate river.
I think that Aegon is making gold statues for sale.
No, I don't.
Yeah, because he says we used to make gold statues, but it took so much effort, and this is much quicker. I think that his business practice is smuggling out gold statues for sale.
Or maybe he's smuggling it out through the lava, through the gold, but we never see him recouping it.
No. And this is the thing is, if you've got a limitless supply of gold, why are you whipping these dudes? Why are they slaves? You have unlimited money. Just pay these guys. Say, hey, listen, here's a bar of gold, a whole bar of gold for every day of your work. We got a whole fucking river of it. They probably do a better job. You wouldn't need anybody to continually torture them. It works out for everybody. I feel like this might be some sort of a parable for the current economy. I'm not
Yeah, you
sure,
think?
but it's just not necessary.
No, but there's a lot of shit here. In that block you just read that had me scratching my head, and I really have to question some of these things, right? I don't explain to me. Okay, so the last ditch attempt, the city is going to be overrun. We're going to lose the mystical lost white race. And what does Allan come up with a plan? He admits multiple times he doesn't have a plan. They can't keep them off the walls. They can't keep them out of the gate. He climbs up to the top of the highest temple, which has a giant gold lion on top. He grabs Groanmaker or whatever it's called, climbs up on top, and there's a lightning storm which happens to come along, which he could have used to pretend like he had some godly power. I'm calling the lightning. Instead, he somehow takes the axe, channels the lightning bolts to hit then the axe, not kill him, melt the statue. It flows immediately. There's no laws of physics. This movie is out the window with anything. Immediately turns to like a liquid gold paint, flows off of the roof, and just hits everybody. I would have rather had them at this point have some actual magic. Have Swarma know or cast a spell. Have something spiritual kick in instead of this ridiculous save the day from Allan.
First of all, Big D, I thought when Quatermain asked the people of the city if they had any metal that they could make weapons with, and they said gold, that he was going to make golden weapons.
Yes, that's what I thought too.
Which would not be great. I mean, a golden sword it's really bad. It's going to be heavy. It's going to be very soft. It doesn't really work out.
It would have been comical.
But then you see the way they're using it. They're just dropping giant gold blocks on people's heads. And as we see the gold dropping, Big D, I realize this isn't any normal gold. When dropped upon the heads of invading tribesmen from these like 100-foot high city walls, these gold bricks are bouncing off of people's heads. It's like Star Trek, the original. It kills absolutely no one. So my guess is that this gold is some sort of new alloy that melts at certain frequencies when you bang an axe onto a golden lion, and it loses mass as it falls. So at 100 feet, it might weigh 100 pounds, but when it hits you in the head, it's only 1 pound.
Have you seen the hidden camera prank on David Beckham that the LA Galaxy did, where they were presenting him with a statue, which they were going to put up for him, and the statue looked like nothing like him?
Yeah, this is a topic I've been wanting to address with you, and I think that this is a beautiful segue to it. I think you're much more online than I am.
This thing was like 6 years ago.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it? Okay.
No.
This is old. David Beckham, they tell him they're going to retire his Galaxy jersey. They're going to like do a statue to him, and they comedically do one that looks nothing like him. He is a handsome man. And this statue is like grotesque. They do the reveal in front of him, and you can see his face like, oh, do you think they should have done more work on it? That's what the statue at the end looks like. Aegon is covered. You could tell that somebody had probably spent the night and the morning doing this statue that looked nothing like him, was embarrassed to hand it to the director, and they said, looks good, just slap some paint on it, put it out there. But it looks like the David Beckham statue.
I thought...
You Googling it? You should look at it.
Okay, hold on.
Fake David Beckham statue.
Fake David Beckham.
It's glorious.
MoonlitTear, I hope this is everything you dreamed it would be. Okay.
And he's standing there as there's this big reveal of it.
It looks like a Frankenstein Morrissey.
It's something to behold.
Oh, it's a James Corden thing. Of course.
And when was that? What year was that, Gene? I'm not online all the time.
1986. No, 2019.
No, that's a retweet.
It's pre-pandemic. It's a different
Gene,
time.
let's go back to this movie because this is some hot stuff.
No, that's all I've got. I want to go straight.
Okay, let's do it. Do we want to talk more about James Corden? Anything else we want to
No. Well, Big D, I'm sorry to say that is this movie. It is time for the Shat Score. The Shat Score is our way of telling you how many wipes this movie take to get off your respective butts. 0 wipes is the perfect movie is finding your lost brother living in a utopian society with an endless amount of gold. And 5 wipes is an absolute disaster. It's living in that society, but being condemned to a smelter where you're whipped at all times. Big D, I'll start with you. What is your wipe score for Allan Quatermain and the Lost City of Gold?
So, Gene, with this one, I'm going to have to take into an extra factor. It's not just the movie, but it's also the intention behind it. This was obviously a money grab. What you said was correct. They filmed them back to back, put everything into the first, it was successful. It made money with the intention to get people back in a bait and switch. Limited funds, limited crew, limited talent. The story was the B, obviously, side of everything that they had. The tracks were no good. And everyone on screen looks like they know it, except James Earl Jones. That poor man, that bastard was fighting for his creative life. And I'm glad he did that, because the rest of the cast, they knew it was done. And I can't forgive them for that. This is 5 white. We always say waste of potential.
Mm-hmm.
This was intentionally deceptive. And that, it makes it even worse. It's malicious. It's malicious.
Now, I have 3 criteria for a 5 wiper. It's got to be wasted potential. It's got to be patently offensive. And it's got to have no redeeming value. And on that third one, I can't say that's true for this movie. You can't say this movie is worthless. We get to see James Earl Jones putting on quite a performance, even wrestling a lion at one point or hugging it or whatever he was doing. We get a shitty version of Helm's Deep, which was kind of fun to watch. And we even get the devious Henry Silva as Aegon, looking a lot like a confused Will Ferrell. This isn't a good movie, but it's not the worst movie. I encourage you to be kind. For me, this is a 4.5 white movie. Not quite 5.
No, I can't forgive them.
And with 4.5 wipes for me, 5 wipes for Big D, that gives us an average wipe score of 4.75 wipes for Allan Quatermain and The Lost City of Gold.
Okay, Gene. And with that, I feel vindicated. We're in the 305 spot. It's now tied with Tequila Sunrise, Krull, and now this movie. I think this is Krull.
I feel... I almost feel like I owe Krull an apology. It had fire mares.
Yes, it did. But this is slightly better than Willow and Speed 2. Cruise Control, slightly worse than Showgirls, Safe Men, and Nuns on the Run. I mean, they're all bad down there.
Well, thank you, MoonlitTear, for our first back-to-back double feature recording. I swear it's not the fatigue. We locked these scores in before we started recording. But take comfort in the fact that this isn't the biggest drop between original and sequel we've had on Shat Scores. Both Speed and Predator, their sequels were so much worse than the originals. Allan Quatermain at least benefits from the fact that King Solomon's Mines was not a masterpiece. Anyway, thanks for listening. Thank you for following us on Twitch, and keep those commissions coming. We really appreciate your friendship over the years. Speaking of friends, one of our friends, John in Spring Hill, left us a voicemail with a question about urinal etiquette.
Yo, Shat Crew. John from Spring Hill over here. I called recently about the Return of the Living Dead. I was just listening back to your 3 o'clock high episode, and you guys talking about the urinal situation. I got a question for you guys that I had a problem with a couple of months ago. I was in Planet Fitness doing my thing, and I had to take a piss. They have 2 urinals there, one a small man urinal and one a regular size. The regular size is always out of order. So I go take a piss in the wrong, the small man urinal. There's a TV above the urinal. Let's get that in reference. And there was something playing. An older gentleman decides to go next to me. He starts urinating in the out of order urinal. Whatever, you got to do your thing, so be it. Then he comments to me about what's playing on the TV. I tell the guy, keep your eyes on your own prize. Guy just looks at me, shakes his head, he goes, fucking jerk, and leaves. Now, you're going to stand next to me in a urinal. Whatever, we got to do it. You're in the out of order. You're already out of order. What the fuck am I supposed to do when this guy's looking at the TV commenting to me? Well, all I'm trying to do is take a piss. I want to hear what you guys would do. Does it annoy you? Does it say, it doesn't really bother me? I just feel like it's a little invasion of personal space. And to comment about it, it's kind of acknowledging you're in my space, so I have to talk to you now.
So, John, I had a personal experience with this. Senator Rick Scott is the last person I can remember talking to me in a urinal next to me. It was not it just didn't belong. He was my boss at the time, so I couldn't say anything, but you don't have a discussion in the urinal. You have to go dead eyes straight ahead. But at least he didn't say, what time is it, or nice watch. That would have been a clear indication that he was looking at more than what was on the screen.
Now, I tend to talk to people a lot, much to my friends and family's dismay. I'll just engage in conversations with people wherever I go. The locker room and the restroom is an exception. I'm not really into having that conversation with anybody there. And I think that this guy was completely out of line, to answer your question. So you're not in the wrong. The court finds in your favor. He must pay you damages.
Or next time you could test it. Peek at him and say, great cock. And see what he says.
Yeah. Make sure you have a wide stance whilst doing so.
There'll be no mystery. Just look and go, hey, great cock, fella.
Shat The Movies says, great cock.
Yeah, see what it does. Next time, if you see that same guy in the locker room, comment about his cock from across. Hey, great cock over there. Great cock.
Anyway, and then when you get kicked out of Planet Fitness, just remember that there's always 24-hour at any time. It's going to set off the lunk alarm. All right, next up we have an email coming in about Richard Dreyfuss, and this comes from Josh. He says, just listen to Jaws, and you guys missed Richard Dreyfuss' first credit, The Graduate. As for Jaws, I'm still listening currently as I write this, but don't you think it's basically a serial killer story? Everyone was unaware of this monster, and when presented to the community, everyone is so hesitant to acknowledge the killer. Huge fan, Josh. So Josh, on that podcast, I don't know if you've gotten to that part yet. I do actually talk about, how they took some pages out of the slasher genre. I think Big D references it as well. And one of the things that I really liked was the scene where you knew that the shark was in the water. You knew someone was going down, but you didn't know who it was, which was a little bit of a spin. Normally the slasher films, it's the person who gets separated out. They're on their own. That person's going next. In this case, you had a bunch of people in the water. And you had to decide who the shark was going after. It was kind of a fun little play on the classic slasher film, but absolutely echoes of those serial killer stories as well.
And I think it just made the early 80s when you had the Friday the 13th, the Halloween, the Nightmare on Elm Street, all of that picked up on this right after it. So it set the trend, and it's something you recognize today. And back then it was something new.
Thanks for your email. Next up, we have an email from Adam R., a longtime listener, who says, Dear Shat Pod, hope all is well, and I'm eagerly awaiting my commission of Police Academy. Question, though. Ironically, I'm seeing your top 10 badass 80s action stars poll, and it coincided with me listening to a new audiobook, The Last Action Heroes, where the author highlights 8, not 10, 80s and 90s action megastars. Sly, Arnold, Dolph, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Steven Seagal, Jackie Chan, Chuck Norris, and Bruce Willis. Now, at first glance, I'm okay with that list, but the more and more I think about it, assuming we have to limit it to 8, I'm wondering why Bruce Willis is in there, but not Mel Gibson. Sure, while Die Hard was a mega hit, sandwiching an action blockbuster in between the stints of Moonlighting and Look Who's Talking, sustained by bad sequels and a Planet Hollywood stake, an action star does not make. Plus, Gibson already had 3 Mad Maxes and a Lethal Weapon by that point. And by the time you get to the next non-Die Hard action mega hit for Willis, 98's Armageddon, Gibson had already done another 2 Lethal Weapons, with a third coming out 2 weeks later, and 5-time Oscar-winning Braveheart. So my question to Crew Shat, did this author get it wrong?
Oh, I think 100% when you go with the facts, he's right. But it's because Die Hard is so big. But it's also the fact that Mel Gibson's an asshole. So if that book was written recently, I could see people, because the people hold grudges, but you're 100% correct. Mel Gibson is more of an action star.
Mel Gibson, who this week was spotted with Donald Trump. So speaking of assholes, but I've got a theory on this one, Big D. It's not that Mel Gibson's not American, because obviously Arnold's not American, Dolph's not American, Jean-Claude Van Damme's not American, meaning their origin nations, right? Perhaps instead, it's the transcendence of Mel Gibson. If you look at Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Lundgren, all these guys, nobody's really taking them seriously as actors. I mean, Willis did have the Sixth Sense, but for the most part, these guys were kind of restricted to a certain genre of film. Whereas with Mel Gibson, I think that he was very much seen as a serious actor at that point who happened to have done a couple action movies. I'm not saying they got it wrong. I'm saying that their criteria was probably a little different.
That's true.
Adam also writes, P.S. My friend swears it should be Kurt Russell instead of Bruce Willis. The Escape From movies aside, Big Trouble in Little China, Tango and Cash, and Tombstone does make this a salient argument.
And Captain Ron.
And Captain Ron. And finally, we've got an email from Jason Huggins, who's writing in about Akira. He says, I just looked it up, and it seems the last movie that charted in 1989, despite only being released in 2 theaters that final weekend, was Akira. So this is in reference to me saying that Tango and Cash was the last movie of the 80s. Akira, produced by Pioneer, the same company that builds my DJ gear, was released on December 25th, 3 days after Born of the 4th of July and Tango and Cash, which were released on December 22nd. I would strongly recommend checking Akira out, other than the profound influence it had on the following 3 decades of film. Lots of films from The Matrix to Looper to Inception to Stranger Things to Kill Bill to Nope. It's a crazy ride that not only marks the first major anime film to break into America's critical mass conscious, despite the fact that Spielberg and Lucas both turned it down for being too alien for Western audiences. But it's a fundamental culmination of everything the 80s had wrought into the world. It's the boys from Stand By Me being thrust into the wretched future of Biff Tannen getting hate-fucked by the Warriors, then being lit on fire telekinetically by Stephen King before being put out by gallons of Icor from a very drunk Cronenberg. In some ways, it's a vision of the world as told by the people who couldn't escape. Set in the seedy underbelly of Darwinian militant capitalism, the protagonists are morally grayer than Gandalf's pendulous nutsack until the accidental cataclysm reminds everyone that the find out portion of the test makes Hunter S. Thompson want to bow out. Lushly animated, deeply and unerringly knowable, and full of the kind of badassery that reminds you why you love movies in the first place, you could do far worse than to journey into the heart of dorkness with this seminal film that has been called one of the greatest films of all time by every savvy retrospective of the past 30 years. Side note, I caught you guys from Game of Thrones. It helped soothe the darkness of the final 2 seasons. Your rewrite of the final was pitch perfect. I love the banter and once had a dream that you guys showed up to a party I was at to talk about Conan because I took a nap and the podcast was on. While I haven't made a donation, if you ever need a DJ to throw down and get everyone laid, let me know. Have Shat, will travel. Jason Huggins, Raleigh, North Carolina. Well, Jason, that's a very generous offer. And I got to say, as far as Akira goes, one of the few movies that blew my mind as a teenager. We recently did Ninja Scroll, and I think that opened Shat up to anime. And it is a movie that I think does need to be done. I love how you tied it to all those 80s threads and really made a strong case for it. So we'll see if we can get it fit in sometime in 2024. Of course, if you or anybody wants to commission it, you can email us at host@shatpod.com or visit shatpod.com and go to the support page for Shat the Movies and read up there on how you can commission. Big D, what do we have coming up next week?
Listeners, if you've had your fill of Allan Quatermain, we've got one more for you. Next week, they're back for the 3rd movie. Allan is again joined by Jesse on their mission to save their archaeologist father, who is kidnapped again, who has knowledge of the Temple of Diamonds. This movie, no, people, we're not doing that. But the next movie is a good one that we should have done a while ago. And I think it's going to be a polarizing film. It's been up there in discussions for the worst sequels of all time. Perfect coming off of this one. In this science fiction sequel, Connor McLeod has become an elderly man after losing his immortality, living in a bleak future where the world is protected from solar radiation by a massive shield. McLeod regains his youth when he kills 2 assassins from his home planet. The result is an ongoing battle with the villainous and powerful General Katana. But McLeod receives help from his noble Juan Ramirez. Sean Connery is a Spaniard. This was commissioned by Ryan P., came out in 91. I don't remember this, but people seem to think this is awful. This is Speed 2, Predator 2 level.
At least you got Queen on the soundtrack, right?
I hope.
Well, thank you, Ryan, for the upcoming commission, and thank you, MoonlitTear, for your double commission. We really appreciate all the support. Thank you to all the commissioners who make this podcast possible. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. Email us, host@shatthemovies.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or by commissioning your own movie. Find all information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all information on our website, shatpod.com/TV, wherever fine podcasts can be found, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. It helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-host, Big D, I'm Gene Lyons. Join us next week for the following movie.
500 years later, the hunt for the immortals begins again.
Greetings, Highlander. You cold?
Highlander 2, The Quickening.
some fun. Rated R. Now playing at a theater near you.
And it's who could do this to us, Gene?
It's our good friend MoonlitTear who brought us back to the second installment in the Allan Quatermain series.
Yeah. MoonlitTear brought us back in. Fuck, let me do that again. Sorry. Well, I'm not going to take trash from somebody named Golan and Globus, but shit, fuck. What were you saying there? You threw me off there. God damn it. Great cock over there. Great cock.